The day I got my husband's diagnosis, I felt relieved. I remember thinking, I knew there was something wrong with him. Now, my husband's diagnosis wasn't narcissism, it was ADD. And I know what you might be thinking right now. That's not the same thing at all. And you're right. It's not. But what I learned the hard way over more years than I care to admit is that the trap that comes with a diagnosis is the same trap, whether the letters are NPD or ADD. And it's the trap that's keeping you lonely and exhausted and wondering if maybe you married the wrong man. Today, I'm going to tell you about an experiment that I've seen thousands of women do with extraordinary results, even though their husband's diagnosis was narcissistic personality disorder, including women whose husbands started writing them love notes, taking them to musicals, and spending hours making organic vegetarian chili, even though he's a carnivore, including one whose husband came home and hung all the curtains while she was out because he knew she wanted them up, including one whose husband reached for her hand again for the first time in over a decade. A lot of women tell me they felt like they had a new husband in about 2 weeks. You can stop the experiment anytime, but if you never try it, you'll never know. I'm Laura Doyle. I created the 6 intimacy skills, and for 27 years, I've been watching women go from burnt out and disconnected to having the easy, passionate marriage they always wanted. Love is learnable. The secrets are real, and this is where I teach them. Stick around to the end. I'm giving out the Worst Relationship Advice of the Week award, and this week's winner is something almost every relationship expert says is essential to a great marriage. It's not, and believing it kept me stuck for years. Here's the experiment, and before I tell you, it's probably going to sound counterintuitive, but stay with me. There's science that backs this up. The experiment is this. Pretend he's not a narcissist. Cue record scratcher. Okay, I know. You have a diagnosis, you have an assessment, you have a symptom list that reads like a biography. You have years of evidence, and it seems incredibly obvious that your husband has narcissistic personality disorder. And if that doesn't change, if he doesn't change, that means you're going to have to suffer forever. And let's not forget, ever. But what if there was another way? And instead of gaslit, manipulated, and belittled, it involved feeling adored and taken care of and desired. Here's what I learned the hard way from being absolutely certain that my husband's ADD explained every single one of our problems. That diagnosis relieved me from having to reflect on a single one of my own shortcomings for several more years. Why should I think about how I might be contributing to our problems? He was the one with the disorder, but that didn't make me happier. If anything, it distracted me from doing the one thing that finally made my marriage shiny and amazing again, which was changing how I showed up. I started treating him the way I did when we first met and fell in love. When I was focused on his deficit and his disorder, that's what I experienced. I couldn't even see what was good about him anymore. But when I decided to focus on what was good about him, strangest thing happened. He turned back into the man who had wooed me, the one I thought was so smart, so funny, so handsome and talented, the one who didn't seem to have a disorder at all. What could it hurt to try something different just for a month, let's say? If it doesn't work, you can always go back to the way things were just before you heard this idea. I know it might feel like a departure from reality to act like he's not disordered and to start expecting the best from him instead of the worst. But the funny thing about reality is that it's squishy, depending on how you look at it. What you focus on increases. So if you're focused on your husband's narcissism, you're going to see a whole lot of evidence of it. And that's not what you want. So why focus on it? If that sounds too woo-woo, here's the science of it. All right. It's called confirmation bias. We see what we expect to see. We notice what confirms what we already believe. We miss what doesn't fit. If your bias is that he's going to be a cold, self-centered jerk, guess what you're going to experience more of? If your bias is that he's loving, thoughtful husband, guess what you're going to experience more of? You've seen two versions of your husband, one that was attractive and delightful enough to want to marry and spend the rest of your life with. and one who is incurably haughty and self-centered and uncaring? Which one is the real him? Here's a question that took me a long time to ask myself when my marriage was struggling. When you fell in love with your man, you were doing a lot of smiling, flirting, showing your gratitude, showing your admiration. Are you still showing up that way now? Because if you've changed how you're treating him, he may be responding to you differently. That's actually good news. It means if you change how you treat him, he'll respond to you differently. Maybe you've been so hurt and so frustrated by his behavior that you don't feel you can show up the way you used to. But you can see how refusing to go first ends up in an unhappy stalemate for both of you, right? Now, you're the expert on your own life. But what if you decided to be the bigger person, to be the first one to treat him respectfully, even if you don't feel like it? Before I get to the part I really want you to hear, where I tell you what's actually possible in this relationship, I want to tell you about something I'm excited about. It's a weekend away, a weekend to laugh, a weekend for self-care and self-discovery. I'm hosting the Adored Wife Weekend in Anaheim, California, October 9th through the 11th. And if you've been running on empty, doing everything for everyone else, this is 3 days that are entirely, unapologetically yours. Hundreds of women who get it, an 80s dance party, and a live man panel that will rewrite everything you thought you knew about men. Women come for the girls' weekend and leave stunned by what happened to their marriage. Previous events sold out, and early bird pricing saves you money at adoredwifeweekend.com. I'll save you a seat. Now, let's get back to what's possible. There are plenty of experts who will tell you this experiment won't work. Narcissists are incurable, that it takes two to make things better. But I'm here to tell you my experience. Every woman I've ever seen who chose her faith that her husband is a good man over her fear that he was fatally flawed saw the NPD arrested. There have been thousands. In my experience, you can expect your narcissistic husband to write you love notes, to take you to musicals, to spend hours making you organic vegetarian chili, even though he's a carnivore. You can expect him to call you just to ask what his hottie is up to come home from work early just to be with you, to hang all the curtains while you're out, because he knows you want them up. You can expect him to reach it for your hand again, even though it's been years. Maybe your husband is different. Maybe he won't ever respond the way you want him to. But if there's a chance that you could make this relationship great again, don't you want to take it? Me too.
It's the worst relationship advice of the worst relationship advice of the worst relationship advice of the week.
And now it's time for the Worst Relationship Advice of the Week award. And this week's winner is the advice that just about every couples therapist, self-help book, and aunt at Thanksgiving will tell you with full confidence. Communication is the key to a great relationship. Here's why I think it's terrible. I understood that to mean that I needed to talk more to get my man to understand. If I could just get him to communicate about his feelings, I thought we could make things better. If I could just communicate what I needed him to do differently and he understood and he did it, I thought everything would be fine. So I communicated repeatedly. Yeah. And everything was not fine. My husband would rather eat old horse blankets than have that unpleasant conversation where I told him what to do differently to improve our marriage. But I knew from hearing this advice that it was absolutely necessary. Relationships actually benefit greatly when you don't communicate everything you're thinking, especially if it's critical or disrespectful. Now, hear me out on this. I'm not saying you should just suck it up forever, not by a long shot. I'm all about you having everything you want in your relationship, or else what's the point? We're not stopping until you get all that. But instead of trying to force a conversation with your husband, Consider focusing on what's true for you and expressing it without criticism. A phrase like, I miss you when you're lonely will do more for your connection than a complaint like, we never spend any time together. Learning to express your desires in a way that inspires instead of controlling, complaining, or criticizing will rock your relationship and your entire life. When you find yourself tempted to correct your husband or tell him what he's doing wrong, zipping your lips until the urge passes might just be the best way to communicate. For that reason, communication is the key to a great relationship is the worst relationship advice of the week. If you got something out of this, hit subscribe because next week, after years of a brutal marriage, Lena prayed, if any part of this is my doing, would you show me? And the answer arrived the next day. And with it, so much relief. Lena was doing something most wives do without realizing it. And you may even be doing it too. Subscribe to find out and don't miss your Try It Tonight takeaway on the Empowered Wife podcast next week.